Welcome to One on One. I am Cyril Stober. In 2015, Nigeria adopted a national migration policy. This created a framework for coordinated management and alignment with global commitments to address the numerous challenges of irregular migration, trafficking in persons, smuggling of migrants, displacement, and climate-induced movement of persons. The policy promoted institutional and multi-stakeholder engagement on migratory issues. 10 years down the line, a review was carried out in 2025 to reflect emerging realities and to give it a more comprehensive framework for development-oriented migration governance. Now, the reviewed migration policy, which is awaiting the endorsement of the Federal Executive Council, is the focus as I sit down with Reverend Father Emeka Chris Obiezu, a renowned scholar and expert in migration governance, international development, and public policy. Dr. Obiezu, an Augustinian priest, serves as the national coordinator of the Civil Society Network on Migration and Development, CSO NetMaid, and Director of Research and Projects at the Center for Migration Studies, Nnamdi Azikiwe University. Dr. Obiezu, welcome to One on One.
Thank you, Sri. It's a pleasure being with you again.
Right.
Nice having you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now, we say we're focusing on the reviewed migration policy, but before we get there, let's put in perspective this matter of migration. Now we hear of irregular migration, illegal migration, and well, migration is, in itself, as some experts will tell you, is not bad in itself. It's just that when it's not done the proper way, and it leads to other things like some of the challenges that we enumerated, that's a problem. But let's start from that very premise, what migration actually.
Okay. Thank you, Sri. Migration is one of the essentials of humanity. Essential in the sense is that it has helped to build human society, development of civilizations, as well as the well-being of individuals. Migration is simply about people moving from one place to another, taking residence in a new place, and then they migrate for so many reasons, depending on what motivates each individual to move. Today, we are actually living in an age characterized as a migration age. In other words, it is an age we have seen an unprecedented number of people on the move. The statistics is putting it as about 1 billion people on the move. And this is distratified into about 760 million moving within the countries of their origin, and about 304 million moving across international borders, those we call international migrants. For these people who move, as I said, they move for various reasons. When people move on their own choice, it is, it is a migration of maybe going to change a new perspective in life, or maybe going to better your life. But other people also move because they are forced by situations to move. And so that is either displacement by environmental issues or displacement by conflicts, as the case may be. For each of these reasons, migration brings in both positive realities. It also brings in challenges. And then to be able to deal with this, in other words, to maximize the profits and then mitigate the challenges, governance of migration becomes an issue that also comes into play in understanding international migration realities. Nigeria as a country is very essential partner in migration issues at the global level. Nigeria is a country of origin, it's a country of destination, as well as a country of transit. In other words, Nigerians leave Nigeria to other places. Some people use through Nigeria to go to other places, and some people come to Nigeria to also make their ends meet, as the case may be. And each of these also present their own challenges to Nigerian migration issues. But, and the undernote of it is that migration is that which helps to build the development of a nation, as well as the individual. And we have seen from the point of view of Nigeria that Nigeria migration dynamics brings us one, from the point of Nigerians who live abroad, we have seen an enormous contribution they've made to national development in terms of remittances, whether it is economic remittances, this amount of money, or social remittances in terms of services and other things they bring. These services or these contributions have also been very impactful to the national development. I think that is one of the reasons why in 2019 Nigeria established the Nigerian Diaspora Commission, and in 2022 a policy to manage that movement or dynamics of diaspora engagement in national development was also developed and adopted by the country. But I know most often when we talk about Nigerian migration, what appears on the news are the irregular migration dimension, which obviously is true. It's a number of persons due to the fact that it is not easy for them to access regular pathways. They use irregular means. Either they go through the unauthorized routes, or they go to a place and overstay their visa, or they use one status and then move into another status without regularizing it. All these are what we refer to as irregular migration. So they also affect Nigeria both in our image and also in our economy, as the case may be. But for all this, Nigeria is also playing a key role both within the region, ECOWAS, Africa, and then globally in managing migration. Nigeria has ratified a number of migration-related conventions from International Labour Organization, and as well as ratifying a number of resolutions from the UN and conventions that also move on migration. And internally, Nigeria has domesticated most of these frameworks by developing national frameworks like policies, standard operating procedures, a memorandum of understanding, as the case may be, and to facilitate that Nigerians who travel abroad, most especially those who go for labor, are also accommodated within the pretext of the law and the human right. Nigeria is also beginning to negotiate with countries on the issues of bilateral relationship on labor migration, and different agencies are coming into play to make this happen. So in a nutshell, I would say that Nigeria is not just positioned in such a way that migration is an issue that threatens us, but we are positioned in a way that migration is something that we manage well, yet a lot of challenges still come around it. Thank you.
All right. So in 2015, Nigeria adopted this policy, and it has had reason to now review the policy due to emerging realities and certain dynamics. And what would you say the most significant realities that have emerged since the adoption of the policy, and what led to the matter of a review?
Okay, I think we can classify this into maybe two major themes. One will be institutional and framework dynamics. Within 2015 and 2025, a number of institutional and legal frameworks, normative realities have also come up that made the 2015 policy outdated, much like. For instance, on the global level, there are a number of policies or regular frameworks, such as, let's start with 2030 Agenda, which was adopted months after the Nigerian policy was adopted in May of that 2025. And then it was that policy, that 2030 Agenda, that for the first time mainstreamed migration into development program internationally by providing in its strategic goals, sustainable development goals, target 10.7, the countries of the world committed to making migration safe, orderly, and regular. And then there are other indicators as well as other targets of that SDG that speak to migration as both a development issue and as a catalyst in development. So these were not considered specifically within the 2015 policy because the policy came before that. And then also between 2015 and 2018, there was a large movement of people across the world, at different corners of the world, from Western Mediterranean, Eastern Mediterranean, and the Pacific Oceans, the wars of the South and Northern Americas. So all these were bringing serious challenge to the world. So in 2016, the United Nations Secretary General, then Ban Ki-moon, convened the New York Summit in 2016 to address this unprecedented large movement of people. And one of the resolutions of that summit is a commitment of the world to develop 2 global compacts. One is Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration, and the other one is Compact on Refugee Management. And so for all these compacts, they now developed what we call, let's take for instance on the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration, it lays out a 23 objective that are summarized in the Objective 23, which is a framework for international cooperation on managing migration. And it recognized, as it were, that no country can deal with migration issue alone because it cuts across border. And so the best way to deal with that is to initiate and sustain international cooperation. So that was in 2018 adopted in Morocco after a serious period, 1 full year of consultations at different levels, which Nigeria played a key role in developing that. And then at the end of that 2018 also, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, within its own system, also developed the Compact on Refugee. And this is facilitating shared responsibility so that there's no too much burden on countries that receive refugees, as the case may be. And then there are a number of other, other frameworks at a global level that were adopted then, which Nigeria has also played key role. And then within this period, Nigeria also have ratified few conventions that deal with migrants, directly or indirectly. And one of them I would just put out here is Convention 181 that talks about the private recruitment agencies. And this goes about on how to recruit free recruitment of migrant workers across the border. So all this on that level. But if we come back on the national front, there were a number of legal frameworks. Within 2015 and 2025, we have seen as I mentioned earlier, the development or establishment of the NIDCOM, which is the Nigerian in Diaspora Commission. There is also the adoption of the policy on diaspora. There is also the adoption of the policy on internally displaced person. Right. And also in dealing with return and reintegration, Nigeria Migration Governance developed the standard operating procedure on how stakeholders who manage return and reintegration could do that. So all these things had also come up after 2015. And then let's look at the trend, a trend in migration within, beyond 2015. One of these, which is what we are dealing with today, is the Japa syndrome. Right. The Japa syndrome is recognition that we are living at a time when there is a more desperation among the people to leave the country, because whether they perceive that they can no longer find opportunity here or not, but the trend, the intensity and the degree of that pressure is higher than it was before. And then we're also seeing that there are a number of programs that are coming up that are addressing some of these issues. For instance, within 2017 and 2023, the International Organization for Migration and other agencies working around the corridors of return and integration had facilitated with National Commission for Refugees, Migrants, and Internally Displaced Persons to return over 30,000 Nigerians who are trafficked, who have used irregular routes in different ways to come in. So the reintegration process of all these people are also what were not contained in the 2015 in such definite manner that respects or reflects the dynamics as it is today. So some of the dynamics are issues that necessitated the review of this policy as it were. And then I think it is also important to mention that within this period, we have had more state and non-state actors come into play to respond to issues of migration. And Nigeria was also progressing in the way it manages these migration issues. The framework of which this GCM provided ensured what they called a whole of government and a whole of society approach. In other words, within the government system, all the ministries, departments, and agencies that have issues that deal with migration are beginning to understand the need of coming together to talk on this issue. And then, not to leave it on government alone, but include the society. In other words, non-state actors who also have to organize themselves. When these two entities organize, then there's a meeting point. And that meeting point is at that governance structure, as it were. And then, I think the last thing I will want to say in terms of organizational structures or issues that made 2015 policy, apart from the time which it has stated itself to be reviewed, because the policy provided that it should be reviewed after 5 years. But for some reasons it wasn't
not. It's up to 10 years now.
Yeah, but there's something critical about the structure that I think were highlighted in 2025, which is in the governance structure of the migration governance, it did not provide for a state-level coordination in such a way that state government and local government can actually own and participate effectively in migration management. So it is more on a global, on a national level. So that, but we know that by reality, migration happens on the grassroots. It is in the families, it is in the states, it is in the local government that activities of migration, people living, selling their properties, the impact are fed back home. So if we want to have a real sustainable response to these issues, there was need to engage those at that level. So this is one of the things that the governance structure of the Nigerian government migration governance space now thought wise that it should find itself in the policy. And so we found it also in the policy when we look at the content of the new policy as validated already.
Today, the world over, the question of migration has become a huge problem. And we see this in the numbers that are mainly moving to the West. You said that Nigeria is also receiving movements of people coming in to the country. But what has led to the global attention is the numbers that are moving through irregular routes to Europe and America, leading to huge costs in human life. Mm-hmm. What are those factors that are driving it? Some would say they're basically political instability in many parts of the world, yet others point to the effects of climate change and, well, the ordinary reason which we used to know in the past was seeking better opportunities in other lands, but not with these numbers we see today.
Yeah, Sri, there are two things that are involved in this conversation you have just raised. One is the rate of this movement in the numbers we are seeing. And the second part of that conversation is the choice of irregular or the use of irregular routes to embark on this movement. Like we established at the beginning that migration is a natural thing. And it is so natural to humanity that if, as we are sitting here, for some reason we are threatened by this environment, the natural tendency is for us to live here, to go to somewhere that is more accommodating, right? And that is basic thing. So you can choose to go through that door to the other end because there is that door there. But when there is no door, you are forced to check any means to live. And so the first thing we talk about, reason why people engage in irregular migration, is there is no regular pathway. In other words, it is there is, but it's not accessible. I will say more on what I mean by that. But lack of regular pathways is that the means for me to leave this country to go to other country and in the regular manner are so limited. And so because they are so limited and my condition is also pressing on me, then I just want to find any other means to exit this place to be able to get into where I am. That is why people do that. Let me now give you why this, what we mean by either complete lack or inaccessibility of this area. For instance, if there is a need for job in country A, and there is more labor in country B, the tendency is that there's a flow from country B to country A, where labor should go and meet, the work itself. But the reality is that if there is no process that allows that quantity or number of labor that will move to that place to go in, and the need still persists there, there is exploitation somewhere. Either the persons there who are in dire need of labor will find means to bring these other people to come and do the job. So it's not necessarily only those who are here that will move to go there by irregular means. There are also factors out there. That is where the capitalist tendency come in. Because when you get an irregular migrant in your workspace, there is always a tendency of exploitation. And one of such exploitation is underpayment. And no payment, I mean, somebody works without any benefit. And of course, those who want to maximize profit benefit from it. And then that is from the point of view of, at the point of where the labor is needed. But also the point of view of the labor who wants to go. Like I gave example of the door and no exit. So if 50 people need to move and only 5 persons are allowed to move, the other 45 will find other ways to get out, as it were. So that is the major thing. Now, I want us also to put it right, that irrespective of the number of people who leave Nigeria or Africa, the story is not that, the truth is that not, or the fact is that they are not all leaving to Europe or North America. The reality is that over 80% of migration within from Nigeria and around Africa are happening within Africa. So it is not always the truth that all of us, I mean, the movement goes towards that side. And also it is not true that more population use irregular routes as it is.
But that seems to be the impression you get.
Because, yes.
Especially when you refer to the syndrome of the boat people, you see, you know, you hear stories of scores of people, you know, undertaking dangerous trips across very dark, situations in order to get to their destination. And then you wonder that how many people are being granted visas on a regular basis to go to those same countries. So if it was that easy, why are the numbers not going through the regular means?
That's the same question. You know, every country has a number of persons they want to take at a particular time. As I said, that is what this country regulation says. And then when, for instance, they exhaust that number, they may not have to take more people. But the man who needs labor over there still wants a way of getting them. So it takes, I think the Argentine says it takes 2 to tango. Sometimes it gets these 2 people to be able to say, do it. But that is what it is in that regard, you know. So when I think there is something else I want to put on this table of discussion. Why is it that this is what we hear more than the other one? It is the narrative that people sell. And who sells the narrative? Is the person who, you tell the story the way you want to tell it. If you are looking for something, you know what you're looking for, so you go for it. So most of the time, the story we hear of this are told by those who want to tell that part of story, right? If somebody comes on this table and what he wants to discuss is diaspora engagement, he will begin to focus on how much money diaspora have brought in. And it depends on which type of diaspora, the perspective that person wants to tell. If it is the person from the other side who's dead, who say the diasporas who are in our country are taking all our money to go and develop their own country, it's also negative. So in migration discourse, we always go for what we call balanced narrative. Balanced narrative tells the story as it is. There are the good, the bad, and the ugly that are associated with migration. But it is always very good to say it holistically so that everybody sees the same, larger perspective. And then, of course, pick out from that what you want to pick out. And that is what the reverse migration policy is actually, one of the things it's also trying to say, and engaging diverse actors. Today, the media people are critical stakeholders in migration governance. Last week, I did a program with some young Nigerian journalists. And before that, we did a survey on how journalism reports migration in Nigeria. And what we see, majority of what we see are just what he said. It is negative reportage. And so this training was to let them know this is what migration is. You can actually report them from the way you want. But again, it is what makes the media, what makes the market that people portray. Yeah.
Then we come to the aspect of this policy that has been reviewed but still awaiting endorsement by the FEC. What would you say are the factors that must be dealt with immediately? Nigeria is a signatory to so many conventions and across the world, and you find a growing collaboration the world over to deal with migration governance. And I also like you to keep an eye on certain countries in the matter of repatriation and reintegration.
Yes.
Insisting on taking people elsewhere.
Yeah.
Does that fall under international cooperation of that?
Yeah, you know, I referred to the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration. That is the most current legal framework. Okay, we don't use legal framework. Partnership framework that the international community has signed. About 153 countries were together in Morocco. That's 2018, when it was adopted in that international conference. One of the key things it says is, one, uphold the dignity of every migrant, irrespective of their status. And what this says is that, one, a country has all its responsibility to defend its territory and its sovereignty. And so what this means is, just like a person who enters your house, you decide who comes in, how the person stays, how long the person stays. It's a personal prerogative. Right. But also, it does not permit you to manhandle the other person.
Well, that's what we see a lot of in the West.
That is what we see. That is what we see. And that is, it was because we have this framework. That is why many activists are taking up those countries and challenging them. If you follow the news also, you will see also an amount of pressure that has been also coming up from different quarters against this country. For instance, we had the UK and the Rwanda case. We are now having the US and Ghana, and you see the pressure coming on them, where if you want to seek asylum in the UK, you have to be referred to Rwanda, then you have to go do your papers there, so that if they are not going to permit you, Rwanda can deal with you whatever they want. And of course, they know the population and they know their resources. So if they cannot contain you, they dispose of you the way they could. So that is why you have frameworks. The purpose of a framework is for people to use it as advocacy tool and as a way of also assessing and monitoring countries as it were. Some persons, again, because governments still do what they want, would withstand some of such pressures and then do things the way they want. But the policy which we have reviewed puts into cognizance all these realities. And one of the things he suggested is to ensure that Nigeria establishes or initiates a bilateral relationship with countries where Nigerians go most, so that such bilateral relationship will begin to create more regular pathways. And also, if it is possible, a process of regularizing others who are in irregular status. And then, included in that such bilateral relationship is the manner of return. If there are people in your country that you could not regularize, for some other reasons your country decides so, we also demand that when they are returned to Nigeria, they should be returned in dignity. This is what the policy is saying. One of the 6 priorities is a priority on ensuring a dignified return and sustainable reintegration.
All right. At this point, we'll take a short break. When we return, there'll be other matters dealing with the reviewed migration policy. So stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. It's still about migration policy, and I'm here with Reverend Father Obiezu, who has been taking us through the various points of the reviewed policy. Just before we took that break, you talked about that part of it that ensures that people who, migrants are treated with the dignity that they deserve. But there's this other angle to it. And recently, Nigeria was a little bit in some kind of fray over a suggestion to return certain migrants to Nigeria. Now we've seen that happen in other countries, where citizens of other countries were taken to countries other than their own under an arrangement or attempts to do that for financial gain.
Yeah.
What aspect of migration governance is that?
As much as we talk about international relations and partnership, you see, once in a while, people become I want to be self-centered or self-subjective in their responses. And this is why when it becomes discomforting or unattainable for them to use the regular processes, then they either fall out of the process, then they do what they want. But and this is why we still continue to emphasize the need for people to adopt and ratify instruments of that nature, so that it helps to be accountable when such things happen. It is not within the any migration partnership, globally or regionally, that you return people to other places on account of exchange of money. There is let me use a better dimension to such an issue, which we are still following through. In order to facilitate migration relationship between Europe and Africa, that's what in 2015 is referred to as a Valletta Summit, which gave us a Valletta Action Plan. The outcome of that is that Africa and Europe were forging a relationship where it is termed migration for development. In other words, that Europe would provide some assistance. It's called European Trust Fund for Africa. Provide some money, some development assistance that will enable the host origin countries to deal with both root cause issues and also issues of reintegration in such a way that it will also help them facilitate the return. Right? For that period, I know European Union has supported Nigeria in migration governance in different ways. The Global Compact through the Migration Multi-Partner Fund, also helping Nigeria and other countries. Even the review of this policy was some of that funding. But what is it saying? It's saying that this other way of returning people by irregular means and other trade by barter means are not accessible, are not attainable by any means. Whether both of them are doing the right, are fulfilling their part, that is a different thing we're talking. But we're talking about the kind of forged partnership that could enable migration be done in a human way and also have a development attached to it. I also have a private of when Nigeria was about to sign or develop an agreement between Europe on how to do reintegration or return and reintegration. One of those key issues, one of the issues was about what? It was this third country transfer, or bringing somebody who is not a Nigerian into Nigeria and then allow Nigeria to do with that person what he wants. Nigeria said vehemently no. And I know that is one of the major reasons why up to today, I'm at least not on my desk, that Nigeria and Europe have signed that common contract on return and reintegration, because that clause has not been dealt with. Because there is no way it is attainable that I say, oh, all of you look black, so let me bring every black person to Nigeria. Then you can process. If those persons are not Nigerian, then you can return them where they come from. We have not dealt with our primary issues. So how much more can we do that? And there are cases where in different countries or in different situations, people have also reported that some people were dumped into their countries who are not their citizens, and they are constituting challenges for them. So just to answer it directly, as I said, it is not part of what we consider effective and sustainable migration governance, and it is not provided for in any of these frameworks I have referred to. And this is why we are still ensuring like Nigeria in reviewing this policy, ensured that it aligns new trend of global frameworks. So there was a critical look, page by page comparison to ensure that our policy is not in any way at all undermining these. Either are we putting any of this above the national interest, as it were.
Okay, that is as far as that goes. Back to Nigeria, you'd say that it's also, Nigeria is a transit point. Nigeria also has people who move to other places and people who move into Nigeria.
Yeah. Has
that been a challenge for those who come into the country?
In 2023, my team helped the NLC, Nigerian Labour Congress, and Trade Union Association in Nigeria to do a study on it's a landscape study on the conditions of migrants workers in Nigeria. It was alarming to know that a number of people who are also migrants in Nigeria suffer most of these issues or these vulnerabilities that Nigerians cry of outside, especially those who are on informal sectors. So there are a number of migrants in Nigeria who are also undocumented. Because they are undocumented, they are also facing some of such exploitation tendencies that could arise because of their status. We also see other issues that are associated with that, maybe lack of a decent work principles applied on their own case. They don't have full knowledge of what job they are getting into. They don't get the real job hours, and then there's no benefit attached. So some of this. But in a large extent also, a number of migrants who are in Nigeria are happy, and then they're also contributing to enormously to what Nigeria's development has become. We can see it in different strata of society where we have migrants playing key role. Also, I think one of the things I've had in most of my conversation are people saying, oh, but there are some migrants in Nigeria who are actually exploiting the citizens. They will tell you some industries where the foreigners own, and then they also exploit Nigerians. Nobody is condoning that. So these are some of the studies we are doing. I think very soon another group are also doing perception study on foreign companies in Nigeria and their treatment to Nigerians who work in their countries. So that is for the point of view, how do migrants tilt their host communities?
Right. How do you handle cases where countries have not adhered to agreements, conventions in the treatment and in migration governance, where, for instance, situations have led to what Nigerians had suffered, particularly within the African continent? And let me use the matter of South Africa as an example here. What happens? How do you deal with those issues under migration statutes?
One of the major challenges, we cannot overemphasize or shy away from that. That is a very ugly situation. And it becomes uglier when we also consider that within the migration landscape, Africa actually suffers more within Africa than we suffer outside African continent. Africa is one of the few countries or continents where migration within the continent is still very, very, without what we call free movement is actually difficult. And that is being, countries are resisting the African Union's protocol on free movement, which was signed in 2018. Only 4 countries have ratified that, which Nigeria has not ratified as well. So what we are seeing here is because they did not ratify, they cannot use that same instrument to judge them. As I said, all these instruments help us to hold countries accountable. I'll give you another example, though it's not one. In 2017, halfway to development of that GCM, United States pulled away. Countries like Australia pulled away, Hungary pulled away. And then you can see how they are also acting now, because they know you can't use the same instrument to judge them. And so it is very difficult that that countries deal deal with migrants this way, it is more difficult when they don't ratify this instrument, because those instruments are what could be used to hold them accountable. We have also seen situations where countries ratify such frameworks, but their national policies and programs will also go against the same dictates of these frameworks. That is why one of the things we're also calling for is harmonization of national policies and programs in line with regional and global frameworks, such that they speak to the same thing. You know, and I still want to say, I mean, after putting facts and realities as they were, we also still see that the migration issues are still considered as national sovereignty security issues. And this is why many countries, including Nigeria, still want to go a little way to more securitizing of migration, militarizing migration, so it is more heavy on security instead of protection and human rights of migrants. We're talking about restrictions and all those, because we've seen it is even counterproductive if you go that way. Because the more you put security on your borders, the more you put military strength on your borders, people open up other borders. Go over to Castina, go over to Sokoto, go any country that you are bordering with any other country. You find out that if you ask NIS, they will tell you that the exit points in those places are uncountable. But the only place they are few places where officers will man. So if you make it tighter, people will not use that means.
How do you resolve the crisis, as it were, in migration now?
I think one, it's like when we discuss migration, we say it is an emerging and evolving issue. You know, it's like somebody who is pursuing something, and you think you see it here, and then it runs to the other end. So it is very slippery most times, and we don't pretend about it, saying that we have handled it. That is why that framework, the GCM, offers the best approach. The best approach to migration management is partnership and cooperation. As I said, migration involves more than one country. And if it involves more than one country, to be able to deal with those issues, then those two countries must create a point of meeting. You know, in the GCM, that's what the concept we call common but differentiated responsibilities. We have a common responsibility of protecting migrants, of ensuring migration is safe, but it is differentiated according to the needs, according to realities, according to the means of each country. So when there is a common harmonized approach, and then countries are really interested in partnership, it becomes easier. This is why we cannot overemphasize the need for Nigeria to consistently engage in partnership relationships, both with multilateral institutions and bilateral relationships.
Dr. Obiezu, there's always been this argument about whether it's irregular or illegal migration. Which is it, and when is it illegal, or when is it irregular?
Okay, let me start by quoting a resolution of the United Nations that brought into context this reality we're talking about. Before 1975, there was discriminalization tendencies of migrants. And for that reason, people were using illegal migration. And the legality and illegality of it is associated with crime. And so you box migration issue into criminal issues. So in 1975, at the United Nations General Assembly, there was a resolution that insisted that countries should endeavor to ensure that migration issues, which are humanitarian issues or civil issues, are not clustered into criminal issues. And when you do that, then you should be able to separate it from such issues of legality and illegality. And then the fallout or the outcome of that is the suggestion, or yes, the adoption of the fact that the concept of illegal and legal and illegal should not be used in migration discourse. So we are beginning to use irregular. I say accept that.
Well, we'll put that forward because you hear most of the reports you get from the West insist on referring to migrants as illegal all the time and not irregular migrants. And this tends to cause the confusion here. But there's also the other angle of thought. And you just corrected that impression. You said the statistics show a different story.
Yeah.
But what is out there, as propagated out there, is that there's this huge mass of people, particularly from African countries, who are gravitating towards Western nations in North America through irregular means.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that stringent conditions have been applied to in most cases, where they're not handled with the humane, in a humane way, where their dignity is most times violated. But then in these parts, many African countries would say, well, when it was time to colonize and share Africa, no one talked about irregular migration. The colonialists came in their numbers and settled and established structures. Now it's payback time.
Yeah, in one of our migration events, I can't remember where it was, maybe I think it was in Ecuador, in Quito, Ecuador, and that should be 2020. We were having an event and we have a wall, we call it the Migrants' Wall. So you just write anything you feel about migration, in any way what you want to do it. I think I came up with a poem, and that's my poem, was just about 5 stanzas of a poem. And the caption of that is, the problem is always about us. The problem is always about us. The summary of it is that the story of us is always told about us. So when people invaded or got into our place, we were a place to be conquered. And when we moved to a place, we were also people to be despised, and so have to be returned to where they come. So, but what I'm trying to say in effect is that, without going into my poem here, is that tendency is, again, the control by the person who tells the story and what they are telling the story. And I cannot flog that enough. The need for people to be open-minded in hearing about different dimensions of migration. If we say, for instance, if NTA just said, in 1 week, take a survey around the embassies or consulates in Abuja that offer visas to countries where Nigeria go. If you take a week survey and then take another, the same survey of number of people who go through maybe not west towards out there that same week, you measure the number, you'll find out that you'll be overwhelmed that the number of Nigerians who are going to embassies and consulates looking for visa, that is those who want to do migration in the regular routes. In 2022, the International Organization for Migration, IOM, who also operates the medical tests for those going to UK, US, Australia, and Canada, said they have over 260,000 Nigerians in 1 year who used their medical services to do that, just for those 4 countries only. So, and Nigeria ranked, I think, one of the first 5 countries across the world that have that high number. That tells you that is for only IOM that does that. I also know that other people could also be using other means to get regular status. So if that is the case, it speaks to the fact that Nigerians don't actually jump the fence always. And I've said it that one of the reasons why such other routes happen is that, one, when those regular pathways are not there, people want to move by all means. Then those who also exploit that route, the smugglers, the traffickers, we now begin to use it and make it, lure people to come into it by telling you, oh, instead of going to line up there for hours and you may not still get the visa, come, we can take you across and you get it. So when you have tried maybe 4, 5 times, you have not succeeded, you might just say, let me try this one. It may work. So that is it. That is why in our advocacy and the programs these days, we don't even push more on irregular migration again. Right. The emphasis is on regular migration. So we find programs, for instance, where partners like IOM, GIZ, all those groups come together and tell people the regular pathways opportunities. This is what is obtainable in this country. This is how you can assess it, whether it is for education, whether it is for job. You know, those kind of approaches are making more news now than threatening people about irregular migration issues. And then knowing also that what they tell us about us emptying ourselves into those territories, not just the same story. I was in Sierra Leone for 2 months in January and February this year. The number of Nigerians in Sierra Leone, you would just, in Freetown alone, will make you think that you are in Lagos. I'm talking about Freetown, a small country. So how much in Ghana? How many do we have across West Africa before we go to the other parts of Africa? So the truth is that when it comes to survival, when it comes to development, people only go to places where they think there are opportunities.
Okay. Well, and it is on that note we'll leave this conversation. Thank you so very much, Reverend Father Emeka Chris Obiezu. Thank you so much for availing us of your expertise in the matter of the migration policy, Nigeria's migration policy. We thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Sri. It's a pleasure again. I hope we'll have a lot more time to do this.
Right, we'll do it.
Thank you. Yeah.
And that's our program today. We thank you for watching. Next week, we'll be back with One-on-One. I'm Cyril Stober. Bye for now.